Okay, so to start with, of course, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are um, working on and coming to you from. And we down here in southeast Queensland, of course, are on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. And we really want to pay our respects to the custodians of this land, being the oldest continuing culture in human history. We would also really like to encourage you, if you would like to acknowledge the land that you're coming from to us from or working on in the chat. Please feel free to do so. We'd like to acknowledge as well any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today, and reiterate QCOSS's commitment to working with First Nations people towards true reconciliation. So without further ado, welcome. I am Kelly. I'm with the sector development team here at QCOSS, but the real star of today's show is Amy, our data and reporting analyst here at QCOSS, and I will hand over to her to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm going to look at multiple screens, so if I'm not looking at you the whole time, I apologise. We should have put a photo of you up there as well, Kelly.
Oh, that's
this is
all right.
awkward.
Yeah, everyone gets to see enough of my face.
So yeah, like Kelly said, my name is Amy Dillett. I'm the data and reporting analyst in the research and policy team at QCOSS. I coordinate a research evaluation network for community services in Queensland, which includes generally webinars and an online forum. And another part of my role is around data capability. So that is internal to QCOSS, but also supporting our members and the community sector to use, analyse, understand and make meaning of all things data. So often people in the sector are really keen and passionate about the use of data to build an evidence base around their community and their work, but they don't know where to find data or how to use it in a meaningful way. So I guess I'm drawing on my knowledge around data and accessing data, particularly open data and publicly available data. And I'm drawing on my experiences working in various Queensland government departments like Queensland Health and the Queensland Government Statistician's Office. I've also worked in the community-controlled Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health sector for a number of years, using their data systems and quality improvement initiatives, and of course now at QCOSS for the last almost 3 years, I'm told. It's gone very quickly. So yeah, I'm drawing on my experiences in these settings and able to provide data support to our community sector and some guidance on where to find data and how to use it. So I'm sure many of you are online in roles where your day-to-day work may not require using data. So I just really wanted to reassure you today that you don't need to be a data analyst to work with and understand data. You just kind of draw it in when you need to. That's perfectly okay. So today we're going to look at some really basic figures, so some numbers and percentages, and then how to translate that into summary descriptive statistics, and then that you can use in as evidence in your grant applications. So sometimes the language around data that is used, particularly by government, can be a little bit confusing unless you understand that particular language. So it is really helpful to understand some of the basic concepts around data and definitions and methodologies. Hopefully we will demystify some of that language today and make it a little less scary so you feel confident to include data in your grant writing toolkit. Hand it back over to you, Kelly.
Lovely. Thanks, Amy. So we've got a pretty packed program today. As you can see, we're going to have a bit of a chat about why building an evidence-based funding proposal or tender application is important. We're also going to then look at what open data sources are, some questions around how we might evaluate the quality of data and where we can find good data. We're then going to look at the practicalities of selecting the kind of data that's going to be useful for your particular application and how you can interpret that and then use that to inform your proposal, your project idea, your application responses, those sorts of things. Throughout, please feel free to add any questions or comments in the chat. I'll be monitoring that while Amy is doing her amazing work, taking you through the different details and data sources and all of that sort of thing. And we're more than happy for you to raise anything in particular that you'd like us to focus on or clarify. So please do just, pop something in the chat at any point. And we, we'll go from there. We can also, we'll let you know, you're more than welcome after the webinar if you think of something to just flick us through an email and we'll do our best to help you out. So the key thing about using data in your project plans, proposals, and your applications for funding is that it really helps you clarify the problem that you're setting out to solve and then develop a plan or a process that is likely to address either the problem or some of those drivers of it. And that's what we're really looking at today. And rather than just telling you sort of how you might go about that, Amy's going to take you through an example that she is working. She's worked based on the Skilling Queenslanders for Work application process, and we're going to look at one of those selection criteria in particular detail. Now, if I can just get you to flick forward a couple of slides, Amy. You will, by the way, you will get a copy of the presentation afterwards. So please don't feel like you need to be jotting down all sorts of notes or that sort of thing. You'll get the presentation, and I'll also be popping the links to things that we talk about in the chat as we go. So we know from the work that community services organisations do that you know your communities and your cohorts that you work with really well. What can be a little bit of a barrier, though, when it comes to applying for funding to run the programs that are going to serve your community is that they sometimes lack specific detail or detail from sources that are trusted by funding bodies that demonstrate or evidence both your description of the project and the fact that what you're working on is likely to actually make a positive difference. So where you are able to integrate data from reputable sources into your applications, it shows the funder that not only do you understand the issue that you're looking at, but that it is really present in your community. And then when you use other sort of information about programs, perhaps that have or haven't worked previously and that sort of thing, you can further strengthen your application because you're showing that you've put significant thought into a real theory for change, an idea of how what you're offering, the specifics of what your organisation wants to do within your community is likely to actually address the problem or some of its drivers. Now, an added benefit to that, which isn't necessarily useful for the first application that you do this on, but will be further down the line, is that when you get some baseline information as you're building your project planner and your assessment, you can actually use that as well as a baseline to then evaluate whether your program is successful. And as you do those evaluations and you build up your own organisation's data, you can then use that as further evidence for later funding applications because you can show the effectiveness that your program has had, which shows future funders that you can be trusted to deliver effective programs in the future. One of the things as well that's really, really key, and particularly as funding for lots of programs like SKU becomes more and more competitive, is that you're showing that you're keeping your knowledge up to date and you're making changes based on changes in your communities, what individual and industry needs and all of those sorts of things. And that's really key in Skilling Queenslanders for Work, both across time because these things change across time, but also across regions. So applications are assessed on a regional basis and there's an understanding within the committees who assess applications that a program that works in one area may not be suitable in another area. And by using really good quality data effectively, you can show that you're responding to both the similarities across areas and times, but also the differences that are there and tailoring what you do to the specifics of the situation that you're in. So if we have a look at the particular question that we're going to be working on through the webinar today, this is one of the Skilling Queenslanders for Work questions, but these same processes and data sources will also be suitable for a whole lot of other funding opportunities as well, because there will usually be a criteria that looks something like this. And it will be either servicing community needs, or in the case of a program like SKU, servicing community and industry needs. So what we can do to strengthen our response to any application questions around the selection criteria is use the kind of numbers that we'll be crunching a little bit later to show that there is a community need there, which is pretty important to start with. There's no point funding a program to address a problem that's not present in a particular community. To show that there are people whose needs you understand and with whom you can work effectively within that community to meet the program's needs. You can also show that there's the industry need and the employer interest in the particular kind of program that you're looking at running out. And overall, in using data effectively to evidence your application, you're showing that you have a kind of organisational culture that's going to support your effective work in delivering a program like SKU. So that's a bit of in a nutshell, the kind of reasons why you might need to use data in a SKU application. And what we're going to do, and what Amy specifically is going to do, is look at particular forms of information that you'll find really useful in showing that you can do everything that needs to be done to meet that criteria too. Now, some of the key sources of information are going to be about demographics. And that's partly because when it comes to SKU, there are key target groups, and that includes young people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, mature-aged job seekers, particularly those who are in industries where there's reduced requirement for workers and who might need to upskill or reskill to enter a different industry, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, people with varied disabilities, women re-entering the workforce, particularly after having children, veterans and their families, and people who've been recently released from incarceration. So that you'll see when we start our example, there are lots of places that you can find information about those key target groups within your own community. And that's one of the first things that you'll need to do to show that a particular need is present. So we've developed, and I say we again, taking credit for Amy's good work, actually. Amy has developed a scenario that is absolutely reflective of what a whole lot of SKU programs have done across the state. So we have said that we're a community organisation in Roma, and we're working largely with young people. That's where we have our experience and expertise. So we're confident that we've got a really strong sense of what young people's needs are and the barriers that they experience when they're looking for work. What we would like to do is focus on the Certificate 1 in construction and rolling that out through work skills traineeships, because we also know that construction, the demand for construction workers is expected to really explode in Roma in the next little while. So if we're going to put together a really strong application for SKU in this scenario, there are some key pieces of data that we're going to need. For example, we're going to have to show that this key demographic, so when we're talking about young people, we're usually talking about people between about 15 and 24 years old, that there's a demographic of underemployed young people in our community. These young people are not currently employed or engaged in schooling, and that the qualification area that we're focused on, i.e. construction, is going to be a legitimate need in Roma, or is already one. So with that, I might hand over to Amy to show you how you can start finding this sort of information and working it into your application.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, wonderful job introducing the topic. That saves me a bit of work. Also, I'll just acknowledge Stacey, who actually came up with the initial idea for the example, so I can't take credit for that. So yeah, I'm going to take you through step by step. So of what using data for your grant application looks like. And these steps can act as a guide so that you can go back through this process and do it yourself in your own time. So a little fun fact about me is I love data visualization, but I'm not the best at creating visually appealing PowerPoint presentations. So apologies in advance. But yeah, I like to think of this process a bit like a puzzle where we're drawing a lot of different pieces of the puzzle together, which are the different data sets. And we're going to work out the puzzle and pull it into to something meaningful, which is your grant application. So it is important to remember that the data and the publicly available data that we'll be drawing on will only give you some pieces of the puzzle. It's not going to give you everything. So there will be other pieces of the puzzle like your local knowledge of your community and the context, or political, social, environmental, your project planning, and all the work your organisation is currently doing. So all of this information then provides substantial evidence to pull your application together and articulate the need and the reasons of why your project is important. Although we're looking at mostly quantitative data for this presentation, it's also really important to consider and include qualitative data as well. So it's important to substantiate or back up the numbers and provide that understanding and meaning and stories of the local community context. So funders are looking for quick, easy numbers in your grant application, but they also often looking for narrative data to support your identified need. That is your clients and what are your clients and community saying. So just really briefly, qualitative data can look like a lot of different things and can be captured in lots of different ways. So it could include video, direct quotes, client stories, case studies, lived experience or expertise, client feedback, staff feedback, community feedback, and narrative. And it can be captured through observation or interviews, focus groups, yarns, case notes, client satisfaction surveys, and online feedback forms, social media, community events, research evaluation, continuous quality improvement activities, and stakeholder and reference groups. Just quickly as a note as well, just to ensure that appropriate permission and consent is obtained before using that data. The steps of finding the data. So if you think back to the example of the project idea, I mapped out this approach that I would take generally when answering a lot of questions like this one. So the way to think about it is a bit like a data investigator, where we're what we're doing is we're going to look for the data clues, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper and find out even more information. So the 4 steps or clues are: understand your geography, understand the population data, which is generally your denominator, understand what you want to measure, which is your numerator, and then summarizing the data in a succinct way. As you go through these steps, also keep in mind, comparison community, like what Kelly said, it gives context to the data too. So in the slides, I've used Queensland as the data comparison, but you may also want to look at similar sized communities or communities of your surrounding regions, or communities that are showing good outcomes that perhaps you can look into further and understand as to why that might be the case. You can also look at data within your region and try and compare that to drill down to like the smallest areas available, so you can get the richest information to make really good evidence-based informed decisions and comparisons. You may also want to compare and contrast any change that's occurred over time. So we're going to look at these steps in more detail now and then apply these steps to our example scenario. Basically, what we're going to do is, deep dive into the data and then summarize it in a succinct way. So step one, I would say this often is potentially overlooked because it seems so straightforward. A lot of people would simply say if you're already providing services to the community that their service footprint or region is Roma, and then move on to the next step. But actually working with data, and once you understand what the data looks like, the language of data, it's really important to get this step right. So everyone's understanding of country and place, location, region, or geography may not necessarily translate and be the same as the language used with data. So how data is collected and collated and shared at a regional or local level is often very different. And like I said, there's a really specific language often used by government in understanding that data. So once you have this step, everything else, in my opinion, will make more sense. It's probably the most important step in really actually understanding the data you're looking at and accessing and telling an accurate data story of your community. The next step is to understand your population, so how many people live in your community, and then also the target population for your program. So in this case, it's the 15 to 24-year-olds. It's also good to know the total population, and then you can work out what proportion they comprise of. If you wanted to look at specific populations for your community of interest, so like for only females or First Nations communities, then you would look at that in this step as well. In this step, the population data is what you want to align with your key target groups. Tongue twisted. Your key target groups of focus or participant eligibility for SKU. And then the step 3 is understanding what you want to measure. So it helps to work out a few things like where your project idea aligns with the need of the community, or understanding the context of your service delivery area better. And these data can be used as your baseline data too. So it's what you want to measure for changes over time, and you can assess whether your project has made a difference in a general sense, using publicly open available data. Um, Also, program data is important to pull into as well to use as evidence. So this step takes some time to work out exactly what you want to measure, or what should be the closest measures to inform your application and project and whether it's viable. Step 3 is also where you want to align your measures to the selection criteria too, so servicing community and industry needs. And so the 4 most relevant measures we came up with are learning or earning, and labour force and unemployment, job seeker and youth allowance, and industry labour market projections. So in this step, you may also want to consider other data sets that are available, but that you actually may not choose to use for various reasons. For example, you could look at current vacancy rates by occupation. There's also monthly labour market dashboards that you could use, but that data is actually only available really like at a broad region. So Darling Downs which includes both Darling Downs, Maranoa, and also Toowoomba. So that might be like a really large geography, and you might say, it's actually not reflecting what the community looks like on the ground, so we're not going to use that data. So you kind of have to make some judgments and decisions about what data to include, depending on your needs and your purpose. Another example of a data set is young people not in education, employment, or training, which is also referred to as NEET, N-E-E-T, and they're considered disengaged from work and training. So I did look at that data source too, but could only find that data based on remoteness, so I chose not to include it in the examples today. So some of these measures are not going to be available always for the particular cohorts you want the information for, and not all data is provided for further disaggregation. So for example, breakdowns of age or gender, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status. For example, if your project is being delivered to First Nations communities specifically, there will be several gaps or limitations for that data. Unfortunately, that's the data landscape that we're in at the moment. So you may only be able to locate the information you want at a state level rather than a local level. My advice really is just to try your best to pull together the data that is available, and then note any limitations with data availability. So the final step is really summarizing the data in a succinct way. This is what you want to do with all the information that you've gathered, and then pulling it all together and like I said, a succinct way using descriptive statistics, perhaps tables and charts if the application form allows you to do that and include some charts. I've also included here like local understandings and knowledge, which could be captured through the qualitative data or quantitative data as well, like feedback from the community or service workers from interviews, as well as other service level information that would be relevant to your submission, like the number of clients accessing your services and what proportion of your clients are 15 to 24-year-old age group, if that's relevant to your application. So that's the summary of the steps. I'm now going to walk you through these steps in more detail using Roma as the example and take you through a series of demos so you can learn how to find and extract this information yourself. Um, so looking at the first example, if we talk about the first step, the first tool I'm going to show you is called ABS Maps. Um, and then that's, so ABS stands for Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's a great tool to use. I'm going to jump into the demo in a minute, and we've pre-recorded this demo, so hopefully the sound and audio works okay. The rest of the demos I'm going to do live today, but this one is pre-recorded. So just before we go into the demo, I thought it might be useful to talk about this for a minute. So when you're looking at these kind of level geographies, you can think of it a bit like being a data translator again, where you're finding and taking the right data and then translating it into a language that anyone can use and make meaning of. So this slide really unpacks those concepts around different geographies further, and the language and terminology that's used to define and describe different areas. So the language is the same that's used when you're looking for and accessing data. So this is called the Australian Statistical Geography Standard, or the ASGS Edition 3. And these geographies are the way in which community data is released by the government and accessed by us. So the ASGS provides users with an integrated set of standard areas that can be used for analysing, visualising and integrating statistics produced by the ABS and other organisations. So the ABS geographies on the left-hand side. There's also non-ABS geographies on the right-hand side of the screen. So mesh blocks, which are down the bottom here of the screen, they're the smallest geographical area defined by the ABS. They're designed as geographic building blocks rather than as areas for the data to be released themselves. So generally the community data that we want to focus on is statistical area 2, and statistical area 3, which is one level up, and statistical area 4, which is another level up. And then also over here, the non-government, the non-ABS structure, which is the local government area we're going to focus on as well. You can also see that there's postal areas, which you may be familiar with, but there are a number of issues with postal areas, including some that go across different states and territories, like outside of Queensland. So I'd suggest and recommend avoiding postal area data if you can. Sometimes that's not always the case, but so any smaller geography, so smaller than an SA2 or statistical area 2, is generally not available data. So population numbers may be released for statistical area 1, but when you're looking at data like employment or income measures, the data is just not going to be available. So that's why I've recommended these specific regions to focus your efforts on here. So if we look at these concepts visually on a map for Queensland, these are the 4 geography types I suggest focusing on. And you can see very clearly here the differences in the sizes of the geography structures. So on the left, we have local government areas, or LGAs. LGAs are an ABS approximation of local government boundaries as defined by each state and territory local government department. And so they are built from mesh blocks. And the local government areas, I guess, to keep in mind, they can actually change over time, which makes it a little bit difficult to compare data over time. So in Queensland, there are 80 LGAs. On the second to the left, we have the statistical area 4s. Most SA4s have a population of about 100,000 people to provide sufficient sample size for labour force estimates. In regional areas, SA4s tend to have smaller populations between 100,000 and 300,000 people. In cities, SA4s tend to have larger populations, so around 300,000 to 500,000 people. So in Queensland, there are 21 SA4s. On the second from the right, we have the statistical area 3s. In general, SA3s are designed to have populations between about 30,000 and 130,000 people. However, the creation of meaningful regional areas takes priority over population data. So as a result, there's some SA3 populations with above 130,000 and others that are below 30,000. SA3s are often functional areas of regional towns and cities with population in excess of 20,000, or clusters of related suburbs around urban commercial and transport hubs within the major urban areas. So in Queensland, there are 84 SA3s. And then lastly, the image on the furthest to the right, we have SA2s. SA2s generally have a population between 3,000 and 25,000 with an average of about 10,000 people. So they're similar to what you would consider a suburb or locality boundary. SA2 in remote and regional areas generally have a smaller population than those in urban areas. So in Queensland, we have 548 SA2s. So I'm going to jump into the first demo now. This is the one that I've pre-recorded, so hopefully the audio works well for this. Apologies if it doesn't. We have tested it. So I'm just going to play this recording. It goes for about 10 minutes. Hi everyone. This activity will give you a sense of how the geographies look using a simple search. Can you hear that okay? The tool I'm going to show you is called ABS Maps.
Sound is quite soft.
Okay. Is it better if I do it live?
It may be, Amy, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's all right. We tried. I'll just put the slide back onto presenter mode and we'll go through the demo. Sorry, one moment while I set my screens up properly again. Hi everyone. This activity will give you a sense of how the geographies look using a simple search. The first I'm going to show you is called It seems to be stuck on my screen. So
this is the joys of technology, isn't it, Amy?
Try to go smoothly. Let's see if we... No, it's just kind of stuck on my second screen as just completely stuck. I might maybe close the presentation and open it again if that's okay. Apologies.
We were talking at the start about all the fun Teams puts us through. This is just one more treat it has in store for us.
Indeed. Okay, I think that's working better now. So it's going to... Okay, I think we're good again. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so here's the tool. I will start the demo live. Okay, so this activity will really give you a sense of how the geographies look using a simple search. So the first tool I'm going to show you, is the ABS maps. ABS stands for Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's an online interactive map that displays up to 2 boundaries at a time, and you can click on your particular area of interest and to bring up the region code and name. Alternatively, you can search for a region by code or name, or you can search for a street address. So in this example, I'm going to show you a search based on Roma, Queensland, and show you how to work out the different regions or names of the regions to help you with your data analysis. So we're going to find the name of local government area, statistical area 4, statistical area 3, and statistical area 2 for Roma. Okay, so first we're going to search for Roma, Queensland, select that. You may want to zoom out to check that you've found your correct location. So yes, we're in Queensland, we found Roma correctly. And then you want to apply the first region selection of interest, which is local government area. So I'm going to go up to the top here and choose the boundary type and select local government area. You can see that that's now applied to the map. And it shows you all the local government areas across the country. So that's the screen grab that I had on the previous slide. If you zoom in again, you can look at your local area. And then you want to click on the dot here, which says where you found, which is Roma. And it will come up as a blue dot then. And it'll come up with the geography type of your search, in this case, local government area. It then tells you the name of the local government area, which is Maranoa. And it also tells you the code. So you might need to know that information at some point. It's a unique reference point for that specific geography. So it's 34860. So now we know the name of the local government area. What we're going to do is the exact same thing to find out the statistical area 4. So I'm going to close that window, select and search Roma, which we've already got in the search function. And then we're going to apply the first region selection, which is statistical area 4. Sorry, the second selection. You can see that the geography applications, the regions have changed. So you might want to zoom out again and have a look to see how it's changed. And that hopefully looks really familiar with the previous screen as well, showing the statistical area 4 boundaries. So again, you can click on the blue dot and it will tell you the geography type, which is in this case, statistical area 4. And then it will tell you the name. So Darling Downs, Maranoa. And it also tells you the code, which is 307. So basically we just repeat these steps to find out statistical area 3 and statistical area 2 regions as well. So another useful function of this tool is that you can compare 2 different regions. You can use the tool to check for your community of interest. So is the LGA the same as the SA4 or is it different? Is the LGA a smaller or larger geography than the SA4 region? And you can use this map tool to actually test that out. So this is where you can choose the second boundary drop down here. And that really comes in handy. So you can select and overlay your local government area and SA4 regions and zoom in and zoom out to your areas of interest and see if they're the same or they're different and whether there's any overlap with other communities. So if we use the same functionality as before, we can select the first one as the local government area. And then the second one is statistical area 4. And so the red lines are the local government area regions and the blue lines are the statistical area 4. So if we zoom out a little bit, so we know that the local government area is actually a much smaller geography than the SA4. So this is the local government here, whereas the blue boundary out here is the statistical area 4. So the SA4 geography includes about 6 local government areas, although they don't directly align all of the borders. So you can see if I zoom in here, there's kind of a bit of a mismatch, and that's what because the local government areas are a different geography set outside the building blocks. There is going to be that unalignment in some instances. So you can also do this if you want to compare the size of the SA4 and the SA3 regions as well. So if we select the first box as SA3, and then the second one as SA4, which we've already done. So the SA3 now is the red line and the blue line is SA4. So if we've zoomed out, we can now see that the SA3 region is smaller than the SA4, which makes sense because we know that the SA3s are the building blocks of the SA4s. So the SA3s that make up this SA4 region here, if we click on the link, we can actually, or the blue dot, we can see what their names are. So this one here is Darling Downs West Maranoa. And we already know that it's in the statistical area for Darling Downs, Maranoa. So you can see there's a slight difference with the naming, the terminology in what's used for the different regions. You can look at this region over here, which is called Darling Downs East, and you can see that it's still in the SA4 Darling Downs, Maranoa. And then over here, the last region is Granite Belt. And again, it's still in that same SA4 as Darling Downs, Maranoa. So you can look at data points for these regions and you can decide whether you want to include or exclude regions. It really gives you flexibility for your grant writing application. So they give you flexibility to customize your particular region of interest, whether you want to aggregate the data or sum the data or disaggregate it, so break it down a bit further into like really small geographies. So what about if we want to compare a local government area and an SA3? So if we use the same process as before, we select the first one as local government area. And then the second option is statistical area 3. So the LGA is the red line and the statistical area 3 is the blue. If we zoom out, we know that the local government area, again, is smaller than the SA3 region. So this is the local government area where Roma is, and it's much smaller than this blue geography boundary again. One thing to keep in mind is that it won't always be the case. So there's some instances, for example, Mackay, where the local government area and the SA3 are exactly the same region. So it's really, you'll see that in the data too. So if the data matches, and they're most likely the same region, but it's just good to keep in mind that sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. If it's hard to tell between the colors and the line outlines, you can try swapping the selections. So I won't do that now for time, but sometimes it just makes it a little bit clearer as to trying to establish what the differences are. So one last example, what if we want to compare local government area to SA2 regions? And so remember that the SA2s are really the smallest level data available. So they're kind of the suburb level, the small area level. So if we look at, again, our Roma example, select the first box as SA2. And the second box is local government area. And I'm just going to search for Roma again, so we ensure that we're on the right location. So we found Roma here. So when you zoom out, you can see all the statistical areas too, and the local government area. This is kind of interesting because the SA2 example looks like it is the same local government area. However, if you zoom in really closely, like you just saw me do before, you can actually see that there's this small suburb level area, which is the SA2. So I guess it's just good to keep in mind because if I was zoomed out this way, it looks exactly the same. The blue lines and the red lines are matching. You don't necessarily see this small area level, which is another geography there. So if I click on that, it tells me that the statistical area 2 name is Roma, and in the local government area of Maranoa. Whereas if I click outside of this little selection, it will tell me that this area is actually SA2 level Roma surrounds, but it's still in the local government area, Maranoa. So I guess just that's one thing to keep in mind. I really wanted to highlight there that maps can kind of mask really small area level data too, if you're not too careful. So unless you have like the zoom functionality. So I guess just remember to use the zoom functionality to really understand the full picture of the data that you're looking at. So if you want to be more exact than this, it's often useful to have geospatial information systems available where you can kind of like overlay your data against specific geography boundaries. But I think in this instances, the mapping tool meets most of your general needs to understand geographies through a data lens. So that was the first demo. So I'll just close that down and go back to our slides. Just pause for a second here to ensure I can see our chat as well. Just, yes, I had everyone's faces minimized, so it's nice to see people's faces again. So just to recap in our example, the community information that we found, so basically we just found the names of our regions. So the local government area name is Maranoa, the statistical area 4 name is Darling Downs Maranoa, the statistical area 3 name is Darling Downs West Maranoa, and the statistical area 2 name is Roma. So I know all this because I used the ABS Maps tool to work out the names of these geography structures of the community that I'm interested in. So I just put a note there to remember that the geography size and areas are significantly different, and sometimes the geography names are similar or the same, and so that can be confusing as well. So it's kind of just good to map out that process from the beginning. So lastly, this is a kind of a fun exercise if you have good eyesight. You can play spot the difference. So it's 4 maps on the page, and with each of the 4 geographies compared side by side, zoomed into Roma as the region of interest and the surrounding regions. So in this way, we can really see and easily visualize the way that data is captured and how it's defined in various ways depending on where people live, and where people are accessing services and defining service footprints and populations as well. So bringing us back to the 4 steps, we've now covered off step 1, understanding the geography. The next step is really finding the population data. So there are a number of different tools that you can use. Skip to the next one. Number of tools that you can use to find this information. I've listed 5 of them, but there's many others as well. So to be honest, most of these tools will give you the information that you're looking for, and they are reliable sources. So you just need to reference them within your application. So I selected these sources because they're quick and relatively easy to use. Some of them also incorporate a visual component of the data when you're selecting the geography of interest. So hopefully that will make it a little bit easier and a little bit more sense now from the first activity that we just went through. So in these profiling tools, you can find data based on gender, age, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status, culturally and linguistically diverse communities. If you're interested in looking for First Nations data specifically, I'd suggest the Know Your Community profiles, which are made available through Queensland Treasury. And also if you go to the third source, the 2021 census community profiles, there's specific Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people profiles in there as well. So it's really a matter of searching and some wayfinding to find the exact data that you're looking for. So if the information isn't exactly what you're after, then try one of the other tools. So one of the main differences in these tools is that the second and third resource there that I've listed, as well as the fourth resource, are all based on the 2021 census data. So as we move further away from the census and enumeration date, which was back in 2021, the data becomes less accurate and reliable and valid. So it doesn't necessarily then reflect the data the communities that we're working with in 2024. So just to kind of keep that in mind, and therefore we need to start looking for alternative data sources where we can. So last year, if you were online, and if anyone was online with our webinar last year, you may remember I used the ABS Quick Stats tool, this fourth one here, which provides high-level snapshots and summary tables of an area's key characteristics, such as family makeup, age demographics, engagement in education and cultural diversity. This year, for the example, I'm actually going to use this first data source here, the Queensland Regional Profiles by Queensland Treasury, to find the population data that we're interested in. So the Queensland Regional Profiles includes updated data where it's made available. So not just every 5 years at the time of the census. So it brings together multiple different data sources, and the fifth data source from Torrens University Australia does that as well. It's not just census data included in those tools. So for our Roma example, this is some of the data that I've already kind of collated for this session. I'm going to take you through these steps in a minute in the demo to show you how to find that data. So we want to find the number of people in Maranoa and the number of people in Maranoa who are 15 to 24 years of age. And so we know our population of interest. And we want to know the total population as well, so we can work out the percentage. And so we want this data for our regions of interest. So the local government area for Maranoa, we want the statistical area 4, the statistical area 3, the other surrounding statistical area 3s, as well as the statistical area 2s as well. So it's a bit of a deep dive with the data, guys, so bear with me. So also for a comparison benchmark, we're also going to look at the Queensland data as well. So I'm going to set the next demo up on my screen, which I might not have open. I'll just pop that into the list here. Okay. So hopefully you can see my demo screen okay. So for this example, excellent, yay. For this example, I'm going to show you how to use the Queensland Regional Profile tool to find population data for the different regions of interest for the community of Roma and its surrounding regions. So step 1 is to select the report type that you're interested in. So there are actually 6 different report types. There's resident, time series, workforce, Indigenous, women and men, and then there's a new one as well called snapshot. So for the first example, we want to select resident, and then I'm going to select the region of interest, which is local government area. Step 3 is selecting the local government area of interest, which you can select on the map, or you can type in the list using the drop down or as a search function. So remembering our local government area is called Maranoa, so I'll type that in and select that. And you can see scrolling down that it's selected on the map as well, so you know that's the correct region. And then it asks us to select a comparison region. So for this time, I'm going to select State of Queensland. There's other options as well that you can do. So that's generally good as a benchmark. In step 5, it's saying select topics of interest. So if I click on the show topics selection hyperlink, you can see that there is a lot of topics here of interest. So it's actually quite overwhelming if you're going to look at every single data point here. So what you want to do is actually clear check topics. And we're going just to select the topics under demography, and we're selecting estimated resident population and the population by age and sex. So you can see with this, this step that the data is updated as at 30th of June 2022. So we know that this is more recent data than the census, which is what we're looking for. So you can see here that there may be other topics of interest that you're interested in looking at, and I really encourage you to explore this tool further. So you can look at population projections, migration, country of birth, religious affiliation, family composition. There are lots of data here that you may be relevant for your individual grant applications. So in this example, I'm just going to focus on the population data, which I've already selected. So scroll down, and then you have an option of either choosing the output as a PDF or HTML. Either is okay. I generally like to select the HTML. It generally works better if you want to copy and paste the data into, like, say, a Excel spreadsheet. So I'll select HTML and create the report. It'll just take a minute to generate and show on my screen. Good time for a sip of water. Okay, so the report's generated, and we scroll down and we can see that the profile is being created for Maranoa local government area with Queensland as the comparison. And you can see that it was created on the 7th of March 2024, so today. If we scroll down, we scroll past the region overview, and we're looking for table 1. So here's table 1. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it more clearly on my screen, hopefully. So table 1 here, we find the estimated resident population of Maranoa local government area. And we can see that as at 2022, there is 13,100 persons. So it's in big bold writing, but it's also in the table here. So we know that's our population for our local government area of Maranoa. And then also we can look at the Queensland data, which is our comparison. So we have in Queensland, there's 5,320,496 people. So these are the total population numbers. So then if we scroll down to table 2, we're now going to look at it by age and sex breakdowns, or actually just by age. So we're interested in the 15 to 24-year-old population. So this kind of column here. So the number of 15 to 24-year-olds in Maranoa local government area is 1,568, and that is 12% of the total population of Maranoa local government area. We can also find the Queensland data in the next row, and it says that there's 667,015 15 to 24-year-olds in Queensland, and they make up 12.5% of the population. So the age structures for Maranoa and Queensland are quite similar when it comes to the proportion of 15 to 24-year-olds. So similar for Maranoa and similar for Queensland. If we're looking at the other age cohorts, so for example, you can see 0 to 14-year-olds, Maranoa has a higher proportion of 0 to 14-year-olds than Queensland. So it's generally a younger population. So those are kind of the comparisons that you can draw out. So we might try one more example using this tool. So I'm just going to go back to the profile and I'll refresh that. And we're going to take these through the same steps as what we've done for the local government area, but now I'm going to take you through for the statistical area 4 region that we did. We were also interested in looking at the numbers for. So again, we select the resident report type, and instead of local government area, I'm going to select statistical area 4. Then we scroll down and it's saying select the region of interest. And so either you can choose it again on the map, or you can select it from the drop-down list or search. And we know that the statistical area 4 region is called Darling Downs Maranoa. So I'm going to search for that and it comes up with that result. So we select on that region. We're going to keep the state Queensland as the comparison. Again, show topics. And clear check topics. And we're just going to select the estimated resident population and the population by age and sex. And then we're going to scroll all the way down and select the output type as HTML and create the report.
I might make use of our loading time to just say, as Amy mentioned, all of the data types and things can seem quite overwhelming. And I think that's why this sort of practical step-by-step process Amy takes us through is really useful. I know for me, when I first sort of saw the different statistical regions and things, I was a bit like, oh, there's too much going on. But as Amy sort of worked through them and showed how they relate to the kinds of information that you can get, it started making a lot more sense. And it's just one of those things, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, just remember that's normal at the start of looking at data. And once you actually get a sense of what's going on and what the steps are, at least for me, I've found that it starts making a lot more sense. And you know, just playing around with the data a little bit made me feel much more confident that I knew what was happening.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all just about playing with the tools and getting more familiar with how to use them. So yeah, it generated our statistical area 4 report for Darling Downs Maranoa SA4. We're comparing again with Queensland. And so I'm going to scroll down and do exactly what I did before. So past the region overview, I'm looking for table 1. And you can see, so the nice thing about the statistical area 4 report is that it also gives us the data for the statistical area 3 regions too. So this is true in the resident profile report selection, but not the Indigenous profile selection. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, it's a great reminder because it tells us that these are the SA3 regions in the SA4 region. So we're on table 1. We can find, again, the estimated resident population for Darling Downs Maranoa SA4. And so that is 131,012 persons. And we already know the Queensland data because we got that from the previous report profile. So I don't need to do the Queensland data again. We also take from here the statistical area 3 information. So for Darling Downs West Maranoa, it's 44,963 persons in the community in that particular region. For Darling Downs East, it's 43,702. And then for Granite Belt, it's 42,347. Hopefully you can see those numbers clear enough on the screen there. So again, if we scroll down to the table 2, we're looking at the estimated population by age breakdowns, and we're interested in the 15 to 24-year-olds. So the number of 15 to 24-year-olds in the Darling Downs Maranoa SA4 is 14,326, and that's 10.9% of the population of the SA4 population. Again, we can look at the SA3 information here. So the number of 15 to 24-year-olds for Darling Downs West is 4,987, and that's 11.1% of the population. For Darling Downs East, it's 4,978, and that's 11.4% of the population. And for Granite Belt, it's 4,361, or 10.3%. Interestingly, again, you can see local level differences coming through in the data. So not so much with the 15 to 24-year-olds, but again, with the 0 to 14-year-olds, you can see Darling Downs West Maranoa and Darling Downs East have a higher proportion of 0 to 14-year-olds in the community, whereas Granite Belt, the younger population is less. So they're a lot heavier in the 65-year age category. If you scroll across, you can see that they've got 26.1%. So basically, I guess it means that, you know, there's more people potentially retired in that community. They love their wines in the Granite Belt. So, you know, they're living their best life, drinking the wine. So it does have implications when you're looking at delivering services to these regions, or what your workforce looks like as well, and now and into the future. So that's the end of the example for the population data. I think for time purposes, I'll skip any more examples, but remember again, like if you're looking for First Nations data, you'd be selecting the Indigenous data profiles, and that will give you the data that you're looking for those communities, if that's the population that you are providing services to. So if we go back to our slides now, We've done the second demo, and this slide really just summarizes all of the data that we found. The number of people aged 15 to 24 in the community by each of these regions of interest. So the local government area, the statistical area 4, statistical area 3, the other statistical area 3s that we're interested in, like Darling Downs East or the Granite Belt, and some statistical area 2 data too. So I exported those reports based on the SA3 data and the SA2 data as well. So just keep that in mind. Went back and forth into those profiles quite a number of times. So if we expand on this from the previous slide, we also then have the number of people in 15 to 24 in the respective regions, and then we have the total population numbers as well, which I got through those profiles. And then the percentage was also reported in those profiles, so I've noted them down here as well. So that's really the population data that we're interested in looking at. As well, I also collated that data for using the Indigenous profile as well, and I exported that same level of information as well. So that's step 2 done. So we're wanting to look at step 3, which is what we want to measure. And remember, there were the 4 indicators or measures that we're particularly interested in for this example. So learning or earning, labour force and unemployment, job seeker and youth allowance, and the industry labour market projections. So step 3, again, it might take some time, a bit of back and forth, identifying the correct data sources that you're interested in and best fit for your project and application. And this is really where we need to put our navigator or wayfinder hats on to look for data clues. So in this step, there are, again, a number of different tools that you can use to find this information. These are the 6 that I've selected to look at, and we'll share these in the chat, but there may be other relevant ones too, depending on your project and the questions that you want to answer. So we're going to look at the Public Health Information Development Unit, or FIDU, data. And that's for the learning and earning data. We're also going to look at the Queensland Treasury data and the Job Skills Australia for unemployment and youth unemployment data, and then the DSS data on job seeker and youth allowance, and then lastly the Jobs Queensland data portal and Explorer to look at industry and labour market projections. So the first measure that we're interested in looking at is earning and learning. So we're going to look at the number of young people engaged in learning or earning in school or other education or employed, and the proportion of young people engaged in learning or earning. So for each geography or community that we're interested in, again, we're going to find this information. So finding this data is relatively straightforward, although it did take some time to work out, if this was the correct measure, as I talked about before. So for the learning and earning indicator, the best data source I could use or find was the FIDO data set. And I really like this data set because it's packaged in a way that's really easy and accessible to access the data and the documentation, definitions and things like that. So for this product, it is quite good and it's a reliable data source. So I'll take you through that demo now. So FIDO has a number of data workbooks available for the whole of Australia, but it is really nicely broken down into state level data as well. And so you can look at this information using the drop down arrows. So you can see when you drop down, you can see each of the different states and territories, and you can select the state that you're interested in. So we're going to obviously focus on Queensland. And we're going to also focus on smaller level geographies. So in these examples, I'm going to look at local government areas as well as the population health areas. So this next demo, I'm going to select the local government area. And I'm going to select the Queensland data. I'm going to download that file. Okay, so you can see I select, sorry, I'm just trying to find my place. Yeah, so the data file that you can see is labeled as December 2023, so you know that it's updated quite regularly. So under the third tab, we look at the contents, table of contents. We're going to search using Control Find, and we're going to search for learning. So once that search comes up as a result, we can see that it's a learning or earning indicator, and it's saying learning or earning at ages 15 to 24, which is the data that we're looking at. So I click on that link and it takes me directly to the data that I'm interested in. So I click, and for this data, we're looking at the local government area. So we're wanting to find Maranoa data again. So you can either kind of scroll down the local government areas, or you can search. I might do a search for time. And it's telling us the Maranoa data. If I zoom in again closely, you can see there. So here we have the learning or earning data for 15 to 24-year-olds for each local government in Queensland. So we've got the Maranoa data. And so on this row, I'm going to highlight that so you can see it even more clearly. It tells me that there's 1,184 people aged 15 to 24 who are learning or earning. It also tells me the percentage, which is great because it means I don't have to calculate that myself. So it's saying 78.8% of people aged 15 to 24 are learning or earning, which means approximately 21.2% are not. And then if you scroll down to further on in the spreadsheet, it'll tell you the aggregated data for your the state level data as well. So now we have the Queensland comparison on row 105. So it's saying that 533,386 people are learning or earning in Queensland, and that's 83.7% of the population. So then we can calculate the difference between Queensland and Maranoa. So we know that, so Queensland is the 83.7%, Maranoa is 78.8%, and so there's about a 5% difference there. And this is something that may be useful to include in your grant application. So we would summarize this by saying the proportion of young people aged 15 to 24 years learning or earning is 5% less than the Queensland total. So I'm going to take you again back to that same page, which is, if I can get that back there, the data workbook, the FIDO page. So we're going to do another quick demo, which is around statistical area 3 data. So we've got just kind of like a smaller level region. So that's actually under the population health areas page. So this time, if I select that drop down list, again, it kind of looks the same, but we know that we've selected the population health areas. I can select again Queensland, and I'm going to download the file and open it. And it's just loading up. So this one we know it says population health areas, not the local government area now. So we're on the right spreadsheet. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did before. So we're going to go to the contents page. We're going to, oops, sorry, I did a click. Undo. I'll take you back to the contents page. Sorry, it's a long spreadsheet. So we've got to flick through it. That's why I use the search function. And I'm in the local government area now one again. So I'm just kind of closing that down. Okay, sorry everyone. So this is the population health areas again. Go back to the contents. So I'm going to control find the learning data set now again. And clicking on that, that now takes me to these population health area regions. But if we scroll further down along the spreadsheet, we'll actually find the statistical area 4 and statistical area 3 data. the statistical area 3 and the statistical area 2 data. So we're looking for Darling Downs, Maranoa, statistical area 4. Oh, sorry, I've confused myself. SA4 and SA3 level data. Apologies. So yeah, we're looking for Darling Downs, Maranoa. So I can either scroll down or I can do a search. But if you can see, I'll zoom in again and I found Darling Downs, Maranoa here on row 327. So it tells me that we're looking at Darling Downs, Maranoa, which is the SA4, and then these 3 SA3s, which are hopefully familiar now, which are the lower level geographies within the statistical area 4. So we look at the learning or earning at 15 to 24, and we can see that there is 10,957 people aged 15 to 24 learning or earning, and that is 78.4% of the population. For Darling Downs, West Maranoa, there's 3,782 people learning or earning that are 15 to 24, and that's 76.6% of the population. For Darling Downs East, it's 78.6%, and for Granite Belt is 80.1%. So the meaningful information here, I'm just going to highlight this, is that we know that there are some variations across the 15 to 24-year-old cohort in these different geographies who are learning or earning. And so if we wanted to focus our efforts for young people to transition to learning or earning, that perhaps Darling Downs West, Maranoa may be the area we'd want to build up and strengthen those opportunities for young people, that we could focus on that area. So because that's the lower proportion there, the 76.6% compared to say 80.1% for Granite Belt. So that's all I'm going to cover with those data sets. I'm now going to jump back into the slides. So we've covered the local government area and we've also covered the population health areas, which it's kind of a little bit like a hidden gem with that data set because it has the SA4 data and the SA3 data, but it might not necessarily be so intuitive because it's called population health areas. So back to the slides. In summary, we've got the proportion of young people aged 15 to 24 years in the region learning or earning, which is about 5% less than the Queensland total, which was 83.7%. And then Darling Downs West Maranoa SA3 has the lowest proportion of young people learning or earning at 76.6%. So I'm going to move on to now labour force and unemployment example. Just for noting time, we've got quite a bit more to cover. So I'm just going to try and rush through it a bit quicker. Sorry, everyone. So in terms of the labour force and unemployment statistics, we're going to look at a couple of different data sources. Unfortunately, the labour market maps and analytics dashboard, which I used last webinar that we did, it was available through Jobs and Skills Australia. That's actually now been superseded by a Jobs and Skills Atlas, and so it's no longer available. So the tool previously brought together statistical area 4 data and statistical area 2 data in the one place. So it's actually a really nice tool. So this time instead we're going to look at 2 different data sources to try to kind of pull that information together. We're going to look at the Regional Youth Unemployment Report and the Regional Labour Force Report from Queensland Treasury, and that draws information from the ABS Labour Force Australia detailed data. So for the local government area and SA2 level data, we're going to look at a different data source, which is the Job Skills in Australia, the small area labour market estimates, which are released on a quarterly basis. So I'm going to just jump into the next demo. Hopefully I'm not going too quick now, but bear with me. So we'll go to, I can try and get it on my screen here. Might just close down a couple of these tabs. So we're going into this one here. So for this demo, I'm going to take you to the unemployment data for Darling Downs, Maranoa, SA4 region. So this is the labour force and employment regional data collated by Queensland Treasury, the Queensland Government Statistician's Office. So again, this is the labour force and employment data that we're interested in. So first we're going to look at overall unemployment in the region and compare it to Queensland. And then we're going to look at youth unemployment in the region. So at the landing page, you'll see the labour force and employment regional information. And the data is visualized here on employment growth, unemployment rate, and participation rate. Then if we scroll down to current releases, we're interested in the regional labour force report here. So you can see it's updated. It's the 22nd of February was last published. And so we know it's updated regularly. And this data is actually released monthly. So, you know, really important to look at this data regularly because it's released very frequently. So we're interested in this report, and we're going to scroll down and select the region of interest, which is Darling Downs, Maranoa, and I'm going to open up the PDF. And I'm going to scroll in here for you so you can see it zoomed in. Okay, so in this report, you can find the total number of employed persons, total number of unemployed persons, total people in the labour force and then not in the labour force, as well as a participation rate and an unemployment rate. Okay, so the data that we're looking here for is the number of people employed in January 2024. So we can see that that's January 2024 data, and it's the January 2024 report. So the number of the number of people employed in the region is 67,400. And then the number of unemployed people in the region is 1,600. And then the unemployment rate is for Darling Downs, Maranoa, SA4, it is 2.4% for January 2024. And that's lower for Queensland. So this figure is also repeated here in the little chart here. So it's saying 2.4%, and it's saying Queensland is 4.1%. So you may also want to know how this compares to, say, 12 months beforehand, which is this annual change percentage. So for the unemployment rate, it's actually decreased from 2.4%. So in January 2023, over here in this first column, it was 4.8%. Now it's at 2.4%. So it's actually decreased 2.4% in the last 12 months. So something good is happening in the region. So now we want to look at youth unemployment for the region, and does that actually follow the same trends? So I'm going to go back to that main screen where we found these reports. Under, again, current releases, then we're going to look at this regional youth unemployment report. So I dropped that down. Again, it's updated monthly, which is really nice for us. This time I'm going to select the January 2024 report as the PDF. And that opens up for me. I'm going to zoom in again a little bit here for you. So we locate our region of interest, which is Darling Downs, Maranoa, over here in the middle. And we're looking at, again, youth unemployment. So the rate for Darling Downs, Maranoa is 5.3%. So we're looking at this January 2024 column, and it's 5.3%. If I zoom in a little bit more, that might make it easier. And we also find that the youth unemployment rate for the region is less than Queensland, which is currently at 9.3%. You can also compare to the previous 12 months like we did before. And so the youth unemployment rate for the region has actually decreased by 6%, from 11.3% in January 2023 to 5.3% in January 2024. So it's actually following the same trends as the overall unemployment for the youth unemployment as well. So if we wanted to compare across regions, Darling Downs Maranoa SA4 has the lowest youth unemployment of all the 19 SA4s. So all of these SA4s listed in the table is also actually, so you can see 6%, sorry, the 5.3% is actually the lowest figure in all of January 2024. So yeah, that's interesting fact. A fun fact. I mean, we just kind of came up with the example of let's look at Darling Downs Maranoa, and it actually happens to be that they're doing pretty well in terms of the rest of like comparison to all of the other SA4s. So that's the end of the demonstration for the unemployment data. I'm just going to minimize that and go back to the slides. So the number of unemployed persons that we found, the data that we found is 1,600 persons. And then the unemployment rate for Darling Downs Maranoa is 2.4%. And that was the January data. And that's lower than for Queensland, which was 4.1%. And then the unemployment rate for youth unemployment is 5.3% compared to 9.3% for youth unemployment. So it's lower than Queensland. So all of this information really helps when we're evidencing writing our grant application. So also to note, you can find this information on the Jobs and Skills Atlas, which you can share in the chat as well. I'm not sure if you might have, oh yeah, you've got the link for that too, Kelly, which is great. So yeah, this will be useful. So the atlas is useful if you're an organisation that actually isn't based in Queensland, or if you operate across multiple states and territories. Obviously, the Queensland Treasury tool is great for anyone in Queensland, but if you're operating across multiple states and territories, it might not necessarily be the right tool. So I guess just keep that in mind. There is also some differences within the tool. So the Jobs and Skills Atlas uses a 6-month average for the unemployment rate, whereas the Queensland Treasury uses a 12-month average, and that's the recommendation, using the 12-month rolling average figures just to kind of adjust for seasonal variation and things like that. So that's why I chose the Queensland Treasury data set, which is compiled. I think there was actually, I'll just share this one in the chat as well, because I'm not sure that link, oh, it's big. Sorry, it's a very large text style there, but I'm sharing that one as well. So that's the link to the Jobs and Skills Atlas.
Ooh. Yeah,
Someone's not on mute.
Oh, favourite subject.
So I'm going to jump into one more actually demonstration, which is just to really find the small area level data, which is actually SA2 region data. And I'm just aware that we actually are going over time. Kelly, are you happy if we continue? I know this is a really long session, but in terms of the content to deliver, is that okay to keep going?
I'm fine to keep going. And I guess if anyone needs to leave, just be reassured that the whole webinar will go up on YouTube, so you'll be able to see it all if you do need to leave now. I can just see that Tara has a hand up. Did you have a question, Tara?
Well, I was just going to point out, so before you were talking about the importance of your stories and your local knowledge and so on as well. And I guess that massive drop in the unemployment from January 23 to January 24, that kind of thing is where your own stories, your own knowledge of that area are really important. So maybe something really good is happening in the area, or unemployed people are finding it, inhabitable. They can't afford to stay there anymore and they're leaving the region. So it's those local stories that puts the information in around it. I think that's a great example of that.
Absolutely. And also you might know that there's something that the data hides. So maybe youth unemployment overall is really low, but maybe for particular demographic groups that you want to work with in your project, it's much higher. It's just that there's such a small demographic group that is getting a bit hidden. So maybe people with disabilities or people who've recently moved to the area, for example, are experiencing really high rates of unemployment, but because it's a small cohort within that larger group, that's not shown by the data. Lovely
a really
point,
good
Tara.
point. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all really interesting, isn't it? It's relevant, and I think I did have a note to say that, but thank you for bringing that up. That's a really good point. It's actually really relevant as well, because we're going to look at the small area level data here, which is produced by the Jobs and Skills Australia in the next example. And then it specifically says, keep in mind, because they are a small area, it can really be affected by different trends, different demographics and things like that. So they make note of, kind of cautioning the use of some small area level data. So this is the next demonstration that I'm going to walk through, the small area labour markets, which is the Jobs and Skills Australia. This data is released quarterly. You can see it was released 23rd of February, so it's recent, and it's based on the September quarter data. So if we scroll down the page, this is where it says, use the data with caution. So when using and interpreting the small area level estimates, be aware that movements may reflect statistical volatility rather than the underlying changes in the labour market. You always use the latest publication. Where possible, use year-on-year comparisons. I'll just zoom this in a bit. And then where possible, use the smoothed estimates. Be aware that the smoothed estimates lag changes in labour market conditions. Do not derive employment estimates and use other data sources in addition. So I guess that's reaffirming everything that we're talking about already, because we're kind of bringing in lots of different multiple data sets together to kind of inform our evidence base. So if I scroll down all of the page, into the download section, we're going to use this first downloads, the PDF, which is small area labour markets, September quarter. It's the PDF file. There's also Excel files for the SA2 level data, as well as local government area data. But because for time reasons, I'm just going to select the PDF, and that's got all of these regions combined into the one report. So I'm going to select download. Okay, so this report gives us the local government area data and the SA2 data. So just kind of smaller level data, unemployment data that we want to look at for the region. So I'm going to do a control find again for our Maranoa LGA. And we can see that here. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom so you can see the headings in the same screen. But along the top is unemployment, and these are actual numbers to September 2023. And then you've got unemployment rates as a percentage to September 2023. So those are kind of the column headings. When I look down at the Maranoa data, across you can see this row here. So for the unemployment rate, for the numbers, first of all, it's gone from 306 in September 2022 to 156 in September 2023. So it's kind of halved. And then for the unemployment rate, it's gone from 3.8% to 2.0%. And so we're really wanting, so that's the local government area, keep in mind. So now we want to look at the statistical area 2, which is the really, really small areas. So we're going to do another search, and this time it's going to be for Roma, which is one of the statistical area 2 names. So finding Roma here, and this time you can see it all on your screen much better. So we've got Roma and we've got another statistical area too, which is also called Roma Surrounds. So I'm just going to highlight those for you. And you can see in the table it's saying it's statistical area level 2. So again, when you're in the local government area, just check at the top of the table what you're looking at to ensure it's the correct region. So for here, and this is on page 31, for Roma, the number of people unemployed has decreased for the SA2 region. So it's gone from 201 down to 96. And then for the rate, it's gone from 4.5% down to 2.3%. For Roma Surrounds, which is the different SA2, it's gone from 104 down to 60. And then the rate has gone from 2.8% to 1.7%. So this just gives you an idea of what data you can find and where it is and how to find it, really. So if you wanted to deliver programs that would reach people looking for employment, it may be best to say target Roma at 2.3% unemployment as compared to say Roma Surrounds, which is 1.7% as an example. I guess, yeah, then I had my point around talking about local knowledge and insights that are really valuable here. So I'll jump to the next summary now. So this is basically all the data that we've found. So we have the statistical area 4 data from the previous example. And now we're building on that because now we've got the local government area data as well as the SA2 data as well for unemployment. So pulling those two different data sets together to have like a complete picture of what each of the region looks like for unemployment. That last example, there was no youth unemployment data. So there's no youth unemployment data for local government area regions or the SA2 regions. And there's no data for the SA3 regions as well. So moving on, we're going to look at the next example, which is youth allowance and job seeker payments. So unfortunately, the data set for these aren't really visual. It's only provided in an Excel table format. There are two options for the data for these figures. We can look at by local government area data, and that information is released quarterly, whereas the SA2 level data is released monthly and quarterly. So it really depends on what you're accessing and which data set you may choose, depending on what geography you're reporting on and how frequent you want that information to be looked at. So the two data sets are job seeker payment and youth allowance recipients monthly profile. It's a monthly report covering income support payments for job seeker and youth allowance. Whereas the DSS payment demographic data set helps you build more of a detailed picture of who your target group is and what barriers they may face. So it lists all of the DSS payments rather than just the job seeker and youth allowance data. So I'm going to take you through the quarterly data set and then I'm going to take you through the monthly data set. So again, if I just pull that up on my screen. This is the next data set that we're looking at. Again, the DSS job seeker payment and youth allowance, and this is the monthly. Oh, I've got them around the wrong order, sorry. Of course, this is the quarterly data here. So if I scroll down to data and resources, this is the data. You can see that it's released quarterly and it's labeled. So the latest available data being December 2023 quarter. We can click on that and we can click on the link again and we can download the file if we'd like to, and I'll open that up. So again, it takes us to your contents page. And we want to navigate to the local government area. So number 12 here, or you can scroll along the bottom to find the area of interest. So the local government area. And then I'm going to do a search for Maranoa, or I can scroll down. Might do a search. Yeah, so it's found Maranoa for me here. I might just highlight this so you can see it a little bit more clearly. So yeah, along the rows here, all of the local government areas, and along the columns are the different payment types. So what we want to find is the job seeker data. So I'm going to scroll across to find job seeker, and we can see that in column P. We find that there are 380 payment recipients of job seeker. And then we also want to know youth allowance data. So for the December quarter. So if we see youth allowance here, that number is 45. If you scroll a little bit further across here, you can also see there's another youth allowance column. So if you're unsure what you want to use in terms of this data, you can navigate to the data descriptions. And if you scroll down, you can find all the detailed information around youth allowance and how it's defined and what is the difference between all of these different data sources. So that's kind of nice to validate and kind of qualify what data that you're interested in. And so for us, we're interested in the youth allowance other category. So basically that's the local government area data for DSS for youth allowance and job seeker. Now we want to do the same thing, but we want the SA2 data. So I'll show you some examples using for Roma and Roma surrounds. But just also, I guess, to note that there are other SA2s to consider too. So we're just looking at a couple of examples today. So I go to, this is the monthly data, the DSS job seeker payment and youth allowance recipients monthly data. And I scroll down and you can see that it's monthly. It's not labeled as well, but if you hover over, it will tell you this is the January 2024 data. So this is the most available current data that we have access to. So I'm just going to click into that data source. And again, and I'm going to download the file. And so here we're looking at the statistical area 2, so number 5 in the table of contents. So for here we're looking at Roma. So I'm in column C we've got job seeker payment, and in column D we've got youth allowance. So I'm going to do another search, and I'm searching for Roma, which is one of the SA2s that we're interested in. And here we find Roma and Roma surrounds. I'm just going to highlight that for you. So for Roma, we find that there are 230 payment recipients of job seeker and 30 payment recipients for youth allowance, sorry, 25 payments for youth allowance. And also for Roma surrounds, there's 155 for job seeker and for 20 for Roma surrounds. Sorry, I think I might have got my numbers mixed up there. Job seeker and youth allowance. So 230 job seeker for Roma and 25 youth allowance, and 155 for job seeker for Roma surrounds and 20 for youth allowance. So last, we also want to know the Queensland data. So if you navigate back to the contents page, we can find that data by state. And we can see for Queensland, these are the figures for January 2024. So 197,295 recipients for Queensland. So that's the end of that demo. Just pull up my slides again. So we did the quarterly data and we did the monthly data. So one thing to keep in mind with the DSS data, unfortunately, this data set isn't so straightforward because so we've got the SA2 data, but there isn't a way to aggregate them up to SA3 level or SA4 level, as far as I'm aware. There's no publicly open available data sets that summarizes this information for us. So with the SA2 data, you could do that manually. You could find each of the SA2s in the SA3 region and like sum that data up yourself. And you could also do that for the SA4 level as well if you wanted that larger regional information overview. But there are also more automated ways to do it, but it does require a little bit more technical expertise. So I guess I'm looking at this data set quite regularly in the work that I do. So we have internal dashboards at QCOSS that I've included in the slides and the example for reference here. So I've done this kind of in an automated way for everyone to just to see. So for Darling Downs, Maranoa, SA4, you can see these are the SA4s, and then the SA3 Darling Downs West, Maranoa, and Granite Belt and Darling Downs East, and the same for youth allowance. So we've got it for job seeker and youth allowance. So I've just kind of summarized that data in the slides as well. So for Darling Downs, Maranoa, SA4, there's 5,000 job seeker payment recipients and 635 youth allowance or other payment recipients. If we're interested in the SA3 data, you can look at Darling Downs West, Maranoa. And that has the highest number of job seekers and youth allowance recipients. So 1,810 for job seeker payments and 230 for youth allowance payments. So the slide, in summary, you can collate this information either quarterly or monthly, depending on your region of interest. We found the data for the local government area for the December 2023 quarter. And there was 380 payment recipients for job seeker, as well as 45 payments for youth allowance. Other. And we also found the data for the SA2 regions, the SA3 and the SA4 with some crafty technical skill. So moving on to the last kind of information point, we're wanting to measure or explore the industry labour market projections. So to get an indication of future jobs in the construction industry that's of particular interest for our Roma example. So the data source I'm looking at for this information is the Jobs Queensland data portal and Explorer. And you can use the Anticipating Future Skills data portal and Explorer to identify regional jobs growth projections, and it helps you understand what Queensland's future labour market might look like and what eligible Skilling Queenslanders for work priority skills might be a good match for your community. So what we'd like to know is the total number of people employed in the region to 2025-26, and then some details about the construction industry and future growth. So I'll just jump into my next demo, which is the data portal here. So on the Jobs Queensland website, we have two options here, the data portal and the data explorer. And then there's also region profiles as well, which are quite a useful tool for a quick summary for your region. So there's also a statewide overview as well here if you're interested in looking at the Queensland data. So this data portal looks like a dashboard with drop-down options. It's got filters, it's got searches by occupation, industry, and region. And the Explorer does the same thing, but it gives you a side-by-side example for two different regions that you're interested in looking at. So that's the Data Explorer that I'd suggest looking at in your own time. But yeah, we're focusing on the data portal, and we're going to do some demonstrations using this tool now. So first thing to note that they do include projections. So they're released based on a number of different scenarios, and the projections are calculated to 2021-22 all the way up to 2025-26. So if we use the scenario drop-down box, you can see there's different scenario projections. Oh, it doesn't like that. I might do a little refresh. So there's three scenarios and a baseline scenario. So you can see in the drop down, there's baseline scenario 1, 2, and 3. And if you hover over the little question mark icon, it'll tell you what's the difference between all of the different scenarios. So the scenario in the modeling include, and I can share some of the methodology with you soon, but I won't go into detail for time reasons for each of the scenarios. But yeah, definitely hover over the little icon and you can see the details there. So the data portal is a reasonably intuitive tool. It takes you like step by step through different processes. So we're going to go into the regions tab. And you can see these steps here. So there's step 1, step 2, step 3. So also along the top of the dashboard, you've got different views here. So you've got overview, occupations, industries, regions, qualification levels, qualification fields, replacement occupation, and replacement industry. So yeah, we're focusing on the regions one today. So you can here see that with the scenario type, I'm going to leave this as baseline projection series because it matches with the report, the region profile report that I'm going to show you next. So, but yeah, I guess keep in mind that there are scenarios that you could look at depending on your needs. You might want to select a different scenario and compare them. So this tool, yeah, it's really allows flexibility even to change the year of projection. So you can see this little year drop down filter here. You can select 2021, 22, all the way up to 25, 26. So again, I'm going to keep this 25, 26 year here selected because it matches the report style as well. So let's follow the steps now and see what data we can find for Darling Downs Maranoa. So in step 1, we're going to select Darling Downs Maranoa as our region of interest in the checkbox. And that you can see then applies to all of the figures and the charts on the dashboard. For step 2, we're going to leave the search selection option occupation as all, and then we're going to look at the industry drop down, which we're going to look at and select construction. Going back to, again, the example that we're interested in, we're looking at construction. So when we select that, it applies again to the data. So here we can find the total projected employed persons in the construction industry, and that's 6,390. You can then select as a comparison, you can unselect the construction and look at all industries, and that will give you the total projected population for employed persons for the Darling Downs Maranoa region and the total number. So the total number of projected employed persons is 70,207. So with this information, then you can calculate the proportion, like the percentage of the regional workforce who will be employed in the construction industry, and that calculates to be 9.1%. If I select the construction industry filter again, it can also tell me, for example, employment growth is 5.8%. It's labeled as selected change, which can be a little bit confusing, but it's employment growth. And new jobs, it's saying 352 in the area. So I can repeat these steps for Queensland data too by selecting or unselecting the region. So then we're looking at just all of the Queensland data. So under the search selection is all, the occupation we're going to leave as all, and then we've selected construction. So the total projected employed persons in the construction industry is going to be 263,727. And then if I remove the construction filter and just look at total employed persons projected, this will give you the total people employed for all of Queensland. So that's 2,913,422. And then again, with this information, you can calculate the proportion. So overall, it's the proportion of the Queensland workforce who will be employed in the construction industry as projected will be 9.1%. If I can select then the construction industry filter again, we can see that the employment growth for the construction industry is expected to be 7%. And the new jobs for all of Queensland for the construction industry is 17,151. So in my slides, I looked at this data as well using occupation filters. So you might want to go back and do that yourself as well. So I'll just skip to that slide. You can see yeah, these are the selections that I had there. So in the construction industry, and then I selected the major category for the occupation to be technicians and trade workers, and also a sub-major category, which is construction trades and workers, just to kind of play with the data and see what it looks like for specific occupations rather than just looking at industry. So you're welcome to do that in your own time as well. But that was the Data Explorer demo. I've got one last demo if you're happy to keep going. So we're going to look at a report, which is super useful as well. So to understand more about how industries and occupations are classified, we've also got some links there as well to share on like the different methodologies, you know, the different scenarios, as well as, yeah, the Australian New Zealand Standard Industries classification and the Australian New Zealand Standards classification of occupations. And we can send that out after the session too with those links. So if we look at the last demo, it's on, still again, we're looking at Jobs Queensland and these regional profiles. So these are kind of really nice like snapshot data. If you're not too comfortable with wanting to use the dashboard and you don't need a lot of flexibility with the data that you're looking at, you may prefer to access the data through the Jobs Queensland regional profiles instead. So we're going to select the report that's of interest, which is Darling Downs Maranoa. And here you can see it's literally just a 2-page report, which is quite nice. So it's saying by 2025-26, so again, it's that same timeline filter, it's saying the total people employed in the region is projected to be 70,207. So that matches the data that we were looking in the dashboard. The report also has some useful contextual information. So it's saying, you know, for example, due to a declining population, employment in the Darling Downs Maranoa region is projected to fall slightly by 2025-26. Some of this loss will be in agriculture, forestry and fishing, but the industry will continue to be a dominant force in the region. Employment in some other industries, such as construction, will expand, while a relatively small workforce employed in professional, scientific and technical services is projected to grow at the highest rate. So it just kind of gives us some clues as to what to think about within that region. So if we scroll down to page 2, it tells you some of the information that we were looking at in the dashboard. So it's saying if we look at the construction industry, which is here on the 3rd row, the total number of people employed in the construction industry will be projected to be 6,390. The percentage of the regional workforce is 9.1%, which is the percentage we calculated before. And then also the employment growth for the industry is expected to be 5.8% increase since 2021-22. So this matches the exact same data that we found in the dashboard. The report doesn't tell you the number of projected new jobs for the industry though, so that's one thing to keep in mind. So this information is helpful to have the different industries, like a list like this as well, because you may be interested in focusing your project on construction, which is saying, you know, the 5.8% growth. But you can see there are also other projected job growths in, say, for example, healthcare and social assistance at 8.4%. or the scientific and where was that? Down here, the professional scientific and technical services, which is expected to have a 12% increase in the region, and as well as accommodation and food services as well, which is 8.1%. So it kind of just gives like a nice bird's eye overview of the data and the different industries and what's kind of projected. So that's the end of the demos. I'm just going to go back to the slides now. So that was the region profiles, the last one that we looked at there. And this slide really just kind of summarizes all of that. So the total projected employed persons in the construction industry, which is expected to be 6,390. You can look at the all industries. So the total number of people employed is 70,207. The proportion of the regional workforce who will be employed in the construction industry is 9.1%, and the employment growth is 5.8% projection, as well as new jobs, which is 352 jobs in the region. So we've gone through all of the data sets now. I'm not sure if we should probably like just maybe skip over this, but it's a nice summary of all of the data that we've collected. So it's based on demographics, young people learning and earning in the community, to give an indication of who isn't. We looked at unemployment and youth unemployment in the community and like the approximate number of people accessing youth allowance and job seeker payments. And we also looked at the anticipated industry projections for the construction industry and by occupation for the Darling Downs Maranoa region, which is the SA4, but we also looked at it for the SA3 regions and the local government area as well as the Queensland ones. So based on kind of this availability, you can see there's some data gaps that I kind of highlighted, which is around local government areas. There's no data on youth unemployment specifically for local government areas, and also no, with that last example that we used, that was all based on statistical area 4 data. So there's no local government area for the construction industry projections. So based on the data availability, I'd suggest maybe you're looking at the SA4 data for the grant application. In summary, so depending on how much flexibility there is in defining the project, you may also want to go back and revisit your project and refine your idea based on the data you've found. So this is where comparing regions or within regions really helps. So for example, for learning and earning, basing the project in the Darling Downs West Maranoa SA3 region may be really valuable, as there's a lower proportion of youth 15 to 24 learning or earning, which was 76.6%. And then you can go back into the ABS Maps tool and look at what SA2s are in this Darling Downs West SA3 Maranoa area. So the SA2s in that area that we looked at some of them, but not all of them, obviously, because there's a lot in there. So there's Roma and Roma surrounds. There's also Miles and Wendowan, Chinchilla. There's also Tara and Inglewood, Wagamba, Goondiwindi, and Bologna as well. Or Boulogne, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that region. So we don't have this data for SA2 level for learning and earning, but we do also have it for unemployment. So we looked at that really small area level data for unemployment. And in the example, I looked at Roma, and we also looked at Roma surrounds. So we know that there's a large variation in unemployment within the Darling Downs West region, the SA3 region. Ranging from 8.7% unemployment in Tara to 1.7% in Roma surrounds. So we could take this approach of targeting, areas with high numbers of unemployed persons or areas with high percentage of unemployed. So I've kind of sorted that list based on the number of persons the percentage of unemployed persons in each region, but kind of depending on that. So I've kind of highlighted Tara as maybe like an area of interest because it's got a high number of persons. It's also got a high percentage of unemployment at 8.7%. Also Chinchilla because there's 112 persons there and 2.3% unemployment, as well as the SA2 that we looked at in the example for Roma, which is 96 persons and 2.3% unemployment as well. So if I was designing a program in the region, I'd probably be targeting these particular regions because of the high unemployed persons, as well as the percentage as well. So I mentioned at the start of the presentation, you could also look at current vacancy rates by occupation and monthly labour market dashboards. However, again, those were really available only at a really broad region area, which was Darling Downs. And then it also had the Darling Downs SA4 and a Toowoomba region as well. So I thought that was kind of too large in terms of the areas that it was looking at. So in summary, the 4 steps of the data, you should kind of know this quite well now, but it's a reminder to do the last step as well. So once we have all of this data, what do we want to do with it? And we're up to step 4, which is summarizing it in a succinct way. So the very last step is summarizing. So we would say that there are 14,326 young people aged 15 to 24 living in the Darling Downs Maranoa SA4 region, making up 10.9% of the region's total population. There's 10,957 young people aged 15 to 24 who are engaged in learning or earning, which is 78.4% of the 15 to 24-year-old cohort. However, this varies within the region, with 76.6% of youth learning or earning in the Darling Downs West Maranoa SA3, compared to 80.1% in Granite Belt SA3. And then all regions within Darling Downs Maranoa actually have a lower percentage of youth learning or earning compared to the state average, which was 83.7%. The unemployment rate in Darling Downs Maranoa is less than the Queensland rate, so 2.4% compared to 4.1%. And there's a large variation in unemployment within the Darling Downs West Maranoa SA3 region, ranging from 8.7% unemployment in Tara SA2 to 1.7% in Roma Surrounds SA2. There's relatively low youth unemployment in the region at 5.3%, with youth unemployment having decreased 6 percentage points from 11.3% in January 2023. So additionally, there are 635 youth allowance payment recipients and 5,000 job seeker payment recipients in Darling Downs SA4 region. And the construction industry in Darling Downs Maranoa SA4 is projected to grow by 5.8% to 2025-26, making up 9.1% of the region's total employment and creating 352 jobs. I've got this point as you, Kelly, and I highlighted the red because I was keen to know your feedback on whether you include this information or not, given that it's the unemployment in the region looks better than the Queensland comparison. So I included it there, but I was keen to know what you thought about that too.
Sorry, I didn't realize I had myself on mute. I think that you need the basic information there. So that information about current youth unemployment, for example, is important to have there. One thing you need to consider though when you're writing your assessment, your application responses, is that you have a really, really tight character limit. So you can't summarize all of the information. You need to pick which information you think is most relevant. That's not an excuse for missing essential information if you think it might weaken your application, but it does mean you need to be really careful about what is relevant and what isn't. Now, if you've got your application going to your regional your regional committee and they're going to be assessing it, they're going to have some understanding of what a lot of these baseline rates are anyway. So you may not want to spend a huge amount of time or effort focusing in on information they're likely to already have, but you want to highlight key points. So things like including the youth unemployment rate will be important, but you also want to consider what you actually dedicate your word count in terms of making sure that you're using it to highlight what is necessary, what makes your project worthwhile. You may think that it is relevant to highlight an increase in youth unemployment, for example. That might be something really important to bring attention to, but it's not. It's not about you must include these particular details, but that you must include things that highlight what the need is in your region and that help the assessor see what the project that you are developing could be helpful in that context. So for me, I probably wouldn't spend all that much time outlining the history of the unemployment rates in the region. I would want to know that for myself. I would want to have that in the summary that I put together for my own records. But in crafting my assessment response for the my application response for the selection criteria, what I would want to focus on is things like seeing that there's going to be a big increase in the need for construction workers, but that we don't have, we don't have enough skilled construction workers in the area. That's something that I would be more interested in focusing on there, because we're talking about a growing need, an industry need, and for this criteria, we need to address industry needs. That's going to be something really important to point out, and that might be the kind of information that I wouldn't expect someone who is looking at my application to necessarily know, whereas I would expect them to have some understanding of general unemployment rates and that sort of thing. So what you would want to do in crafting your response is you want to not just summarise all of the information that you've gathered, because that's going to be a whole lot of information that's not actually relevant in the assessment process, but also that may make it harder for the assessor to see what the actually really relevant and important information is. So this is where your own judgment really comes into play. You need to be thinking about what is it that you can put together that is going to really make clear to the assessor why your project is worth funding. Does that answer the question, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think yeah, we put the summary there, but I guess when you look at the data, like you don't know what you're going to find out really. So it didn't necessarily that's what it's saying. But yeah, again, it would be really interesting, knowing the local context to kind of make it more meaningful and be like, okay, well, actually, maybe you could look at like the unemployment that's only going back 12 months, but what about 5 years? What is it kind of like? There's trends or like there's different limitations to the data too. Like, for example, if there's flooding in the region, that can really change unemployment rates. It can, so I guess it's just really important to keep that in mind as well.
It is, and you need to consider the priority for giving a whole lot of contextual information when you're developing your responses. So as I said, it's important that you understand that information, but it may not be what you need to use your precious character limit on in writing your response. So you want to have a much bigger and broader understanding and a much more detailed understanding to inform what you put in your assessment response, your application response, as compared with what the assessor needs to read to understand why this is important, right? And the better your understanding is, the more detailed and focused you can be on what is essential for the assessor to understand. If your understanding is lacking, you won't develop good responses, but that doesn't mean that you have to try and get everything crammed into the response, because that just isn't going to work.
Wonderful. Did you want to go through the top tips?
I think, in the interest of time, we might just leave our viewers to have a look through those when the the presentation slides come out in the email, I think. As much as I would like to, I think we're probably really pushing people's patience and the time frame there. At this point, I was just saying in the chat, we'll definitely have to look at scheduling a 2-hour webinar for next time.
We did 1 hour last time, and I thought 1 hour and a half would be good, but it's just so detailed, isn't it? You can really get lost in the data. Yeah. I'm sincere apologies for going over time, everyone. Yeah, so that was all really from me. I don't need to go through the rest of the slides, but there's, you know, upcoming opportunities that people might like to get involved with the Research and Evaluation Network. So if you wanted to end, Kelly, I'm happy for you to do that.
Yeah, we can wrap up. So what I would encourage you to do is have a look through the presentation when you get the email. I really encourage you to go back through it, because I know for myself as well, with this level of detail, it is really important to refresh and your understanding. We do have some more webinars and things coming up, as well as a whole lot of resources on the QCOSS website. So please, we'll include a bunch of links to things to explore. Please feel free to make use of all of the resources that are there, and also to reach out to us if you have particular questions or things that weren't covered or you'd like a bit more direction on. Always more than happy to hear and have a bit of a chat. But other than that, just, huge thank you for coming along and for sticking with us. About half of our participants have stuck with us for the extended session, so that's really amazing. And if you are able to, I'm just going to pop up a little poll. This is part of our data and evaluation process, is to get your feedback about how things went. We'd love to get any feedback you have. Let us know, if there are things that you would like to see done differently, or things covered that we didn't cover, anything like that. Really, really appreciate it. And other than that, just thanks so much for your time. It's been really delightful to have such engaged folks on the line with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Really lovely to meet you all. Definitely feel free to reach out if you've got data questions to us.
Definitely, please do. And can someone just give me a little thumbs up to confirm if you can see the poll on your screen? Lovely, beautiful. Thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your time today.